The Ultimate Fighter finale, Season 28, Team Gastelum versus Team Whittaker. The finale takes place November 30th, 2018 at the Pearl Concert Theater at the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, featuring a main event bout of Kamaru Usman taking on former lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos. But before we get into a breakdown of that, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the cards featured on the prelims and on the undercard. But before we get to that, make sure you leave a comment on who you think is going to win, because every comment you put increases your chance of getting a shout out in the next video. Last person winner is right here, so thank you once again for the comment. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. The first fight that I want to cover features Daryl the Saint Horcher. And let's just talk about the Saint here for a second. Born in the United States. He's 31 years old, 5'10", fighting out of Euroveiled Athletics. Holds a professional record of 13 wins, 3 losses. Obviously has a 46% chance of knocking you out, 8% chance of submitting you, and a 46% chance of taking this fight all the way and getting a decision. And if we look at who he has fought, a lot of you may remember that he was a late replacement against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Made his debut, and that is not an easy opponent to make a debut against. Khabib obviously took that fight to the ground, and Daryl Horcher, you can't blame him, had nothing to answer for the ground and pound and just the sheer dominance of Khabib. But he did come back and get a split decision victory of his own back in June 2017. However, December 9th, he lost another unanimous decision, making his overall UFC record 1 win, 2 losses. Took a year off to potentially sharpen his game, and now he's coming back November 30th. Prior to his stint in the UFC, he's competed in a lot of different areas, principally in the CFFC organization. He made a little bit of a run here in Bellator, fighting in Bellator 77, Bellator 83, even Bellator 95. And before he got his call to the UFC, he was on a 5-fight win streak. But let's talk about his opponent. Roosevelt Roberts, known as the Predator, known as the Roe, known as Go-Getter. Young man, only 24 years young, 6 foot 1 inches tall, out of 155 lightweight. That keeps surprising me. Lightweights are so tall, so lengthy nowadays. He holds a professional record of 6 wins with absolutely no losses. Look at where he's coming from. He competed on Bellator, the same card that Rampage Jackson took on Chael Sonnen, but he was a contender on Dana White's Contender Series on Season 2, Episode 7. This was back in July of 2018, where he took out Garrett Gross with a submission via rear naked choke in the second round. Look at this guy's amateur record, 4 fights in the amateur circuit. Has not tasted defeat once, not as an amateur or as a professional. Definitely gets a step up here in competition against Daryl Horcher. Daryl, if he loses, could presumably be cut from the UFC. But you know how we do it here. We're going to look at the fight metrics here. Starting with Roosevelt Roberts, the Predator. His significant strikes landed per minute is an amazing 4.99. Again, fight metrics definitely does not have the the data for all of the 6 fights, but most importantly, they do have probably the results from his last fight in Dana White's Contender Series. So, almost 5 significant strikes landed in that match with a takedown average of 6.24. And again, these are takedowns landed per 15 minutes, not per round. Striking accuracy is an unbelievable 75%. You can expect that to go down as he fights more competition and as he just fights more often and on bigger platforms where Fight Metric can get more of a data pool. And not looking too much at the rest of stats, because again, there's not enough information here to make a proper deduction. But if you flip over to the Saint, Daryl Horcher lands 2 significant strikes per minute. Takedown average, of course, you can see here, doesn't go for the takedowns that often. However, his takedown accuracy is 100%. So when he does, typically he will get it. His takedown defense is 47%. But you guys need to remember, he faced Khabib Nurmagomedov, so that takedown defense number definitely took a hit. However, his striking accuracy is 47%. Significant strikes absorbed per minute, 4.32. Again, these stats right here don't necessarily impress me, but overall, I think Roosevelt Roberts can take this fight if Daryl Horcher isn't careful. I know Daryl Horcher is kind of, he needs a victory here. I could probably suspect if he gets another one, 2 in a row, he would presumably be cut, while Roosevelt Roberts is one of these graduates from Dana White's Contender Series. So, in my honest opinion, I do believe I have to give this fight to the go-getter Roosevelt Roberts. Moving on to the next fight that I want to cover, it features Joseph Benavidez, standing at 5 foot 4 inches tall, 34 years old, trains out of Team Alpha Male, holds a professional record of 25 wins with only 5 losses. He's taking on Alex Perez, but before we go dive into Alex, let's look at this impressive resume that Joseph Benavidez has been able to create. And I mean, it's just something unbelievable. Look at all of these UFC fights with only 3 losses. 2 of those coming to Demetrius Johnson, and his last one coming via split decision loss to Sergio Pettis. But before then, it was on a very impressive 6-fight winning streak, including a win over current UFC flyweight champion Henry Cejudo. Prior to that, he's been the likes of Zach Makovsky, Alec Bagotinov, John Morega, Dustin Ortiz, even Tim Elliott, to name a few. And I mean, this guy has fought the best of the best in flyweight and just all over the world. Can't say enough good things about Joseph Benavidez. Definitely game ready. Definitely a fighter you do not want to face. Definitely treat every time we get to see this guy. But let's flip over to Alex Perez. Stands 5 foot 6 inches tall. 5 foot 6 inches tall. Holds a professional record of 21 wins with only 4 losses. Significantly younger. Is only 26 years old. And if you look at this guy, also a graduate from Season 1 of Dana White's Contender Series, where he beat Kevin Gray. And afterwards that, he's shown that he can submit people, take him to decision, and even get a knockout victory, as he demonstrated back in August when he took out Jose Torres. But as you know, let's go look at the statistics here. Joseph Benavidez, overall, just a solid mixed martial artist. Not any strike is too impressive, but at the same point, not any strike is disappointing, not even close. And I mean, this is probably the perfect example of a mixed martial artist, a person who's fluent in every aspect of MMA. 3.44 significant strikes landed per minute with a 32% accuracy, and, does absorb 2.5 strikes, but with the faster, smaller guys, that is nothing to be too disappointed about, with his striking defense at a very nice and respectable 64%. And we flip over to his grappling takedown game. Lands about 1.26 takedowns per fight with a takedown accuracy of 27%, right? I mean, yeah, the takedown accuracy could be a bit higher, but he's not an offensive wrestler. He's definitely more of a stand-up fighter, and it showed with his takedown defense at an impressive 66%, and that's after fighting Demetrius Johnson twice and Henry Cejudo, who is a former gold Olympic medalist. So these are very impressive stats coming from Joseph Benavidez. Alex Perez definitely has his hands tied, but, we have to give him respect for his stats right here. Lands a surprising 5.25 significant strikes landed per minute with a striking accuracy of 46%. Absorbs 3 strikes per minute, so, he takes more strikes, but he definitely outputs a lot more as well. With a striking defense of 61%, and looking at his grappling aspects, lands almost 4 takedowns per match with an accuracy of 43%, and that perfect takedown defense. It doesn't seem like anybody's been able to take him down. If we do a side-by-side comparison here, we get to see the stats. We see that Alex Perez is taller. He doesn't have as much fight time on average. Southpaw versus Orthodox both have the same reach, significantly younger. If we look at the striking, he has more output, more accurate, takes more, and has less damage. So that's a trade-off. That's almost a 1-to-1 here, ladies and gentlemen. And for grappling, definitely more active offensively, but defensively, I would say that, of course, it's impressive to have 100% takedown defense, but he has not fought the wrestlers that Joseph Benavidez has fought. Joseph Benavidez is coming off a loss, while Alex Perez is on a streak here. This is definitely going to be Alex Perez's toughest challenge, but judging just how good Joseph looked in his last fight, judging how good he's looked in all of his fights, I'm definitely going to give this fight to Joseph Benavidez. Now, an interesting fight here with a name a lot of people may recognize, or at least the last name, with Antonina Schevchenko, also known as Pantera. If you know whose nickname she shares that with, leave that comment down below for a chance for a shout out. Fighting out of Kazakhstan, she is 34 years old, very tall for her weight class at 5 foot 8 inches, weighing out of 125 pounds. Fighting out of Tiger Muay Thai, holds a perfect MMA record of 6 wins, 0 losses. If you haven't already realized, she is the sister of UFC, outstanding fighter Valentina Shevchenko. And if you look, she was a contender and graduate of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series back in June, where she took out Nia Vera with knees, where Herb Dean had to come and stop the fight in the second round. Definitely leveraged because of her last name. But let's look at her opponent without giving too much, emphasis on Shevchenko. We got Ji Yeon Kim, also known as Fire Fist, 29 years old, 1 inch shorter than Antonina. Holds a professional record of 8 wins, 1 loss, fighting out of South Korea. We look at her, fighting record, and it's actually more impressive than you should give it credit for. Her debut, she lost to Lucci via unanimous decision, and 2 split decision victories over Melinda and Justine Kish. However, those are 2 victories in a pretty stacked division in women's MMA, where the top level is definitely there. UFC record now 2-1. This is definitely going to be a great fight for Shevchenko. This could definitely be a big stepping stone for Kim. And let's look at the fight metric for both these fighters, starting with Antonina Schevchenko. I mean, the striking on this fighter is just absolutely bonkers. 8.73 strikes, significant strikes landed per minute with an accuracy of 66%, and only absorbing 1.6 significant strikes per minute with a very, very rock-solid 46% striking defense. Not much to say in terms of the takedown grappling aspect. Again, that's probably because there hasn't been that much information to gather. And if you look at Kim, I doubt there's anything, even more. Striking, again, that output, 4.47 significant strikes landed per minute. Although taking a much higher 4.91 absorbed per minute. And if we do a comparison here, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we have 8-1-2 versus 6-0-0. 1 inch difference for Antonina. Orthodox versus Southpaw, both relatively the same in age. However, Kim is 5 years younger than Antonina. And if you look at the striking, I mean, this output from Antonina is just absolutely not sustainable. This is definitely going to go down after this fight, I presume. The defense, Kim definitely, has more defense, but the amount of shots she absorbs could be detrimental when she faces Antonina. And again, there's not enough information here for the grappling aspect. However, my pick for this fight will be Antonina Schevchenko, knowing that she trains closer to Valentina Shevchenko, knowing that she's training with top tier strawweights, top tier just women MMA fighters. I definitely have to give this to Antonina Schevchenko. Now, in the co-main event for the Ultimate Fighter 28 finale, we have Bryan Kid Lightning Caraway, 34 years old, fighting out of Extreme Couture, holds a professional record of 21 wins with 8 losses, makes his, second appearance in 2018 after taking a long layoff after his victory over Aljamain Sterling. This guy has been around the UFC for a while, has been around the MMA game for a while, Obviously, the elephant in the room, he used to be the boyfriend of Miesha Tate. That's no longer the case. And if you look at, his UFC performances, they are pretty goddamn impressive. He is 6-3, only losses to Takeya Mizugaki, Rafael Asenso, and Cody Stamann. None of those losses are disappointing or anything to be upset about. And if you look at the people he's beat, you got Mitch Gagnon there, you got Eddie Wineland, Eric Perez, and even Aljamain Sterling. Although split decision, nevertheless, that's a victory for Mr. Kid Lightning, coming back for a co-main event here against Pedro, the young Punisher Munhoz, 5 foot 6 inches tall, 32 years old, fighting out of American Top Team from Brazil, holds a professional record of 16 wins with 3 losses. We look at his UFC career, You know, a lot of people may not know this guy, but he has hung around there and fought the best of the best, including, Rafael, Jimmy Rivera, Justin Scoggins, Rob Font, John Dodson, Brett Johns coming off that victory unanimously back in August. I mean, this guy has definitely fought the best of the best. He's a very active fighter. This is his third fight in 2018, and his last fight in 2017 was in October against Rob Font, where he won via guillotine choke. This is an interesting fight. This could be probably one of the most interesting fights because you have such a different style between Bryan Caraway and Pedro Munhoz. But if you look at the fight metrics, and we're going to just straight away jump into the comparison here. Look at these two fighters. We definitely see that Bryan Caraway likes to take the fight longer. His average fight time is 11 minutes as opposed to Munhoz's, which only 9. Bryan's going to have a 2-inch height advantage and a 4-inch reach advantage that I do hope he plays to his advantage. Not much of an age difference here. Both fighters are in the traditional orthodox stance. And if we look at the striking aspect here, I mean, all around, you got to give it to Munhoz. You got to give it to the fact that he outputs almost 5 significant strikes landed per minute as opposed to Bryan Caraway's 2.43. The striking accuracy, there's almost a full 10% difference here. Although Bryan Caraway isn't known to be a striker, that will definitely play into Munhoz's favor. Although, because of that aspect and because of his, higher output, Munhoz does take a higher 5.34 strikes absorbed per minute, while Caraway is less. And their defense is relatively the same, with 58% going to Munhoz to Bryan Caraway's 54%. But the advantage is definitely, striking Munhoz. But in grappling aspect, you got to give it to Bryan Caraway. Per 15 minutes, Bryan Caraway is able to land 2.62 takedowns versus Pedro Munhoz's 1.15. That accuracy that Bryan Caraway comes isn't anything to be impressed about. Only 26%, so it only lands about a quarter of his takedowns, but it's still better than Pedro Munhoz's. And his takedown defense is actually very impressive at 80%. Bryan Caraway's fought a lot of good, talented wrestlers. His wrestling defense was on display against Aljamain Sterling. Pedro Munhoz still, 71% takedown defense is still very impressive. We'll see if that's enough to block the takedown and that pressure game that Bryan Caraway is going to put out there in the octagon. And, this is a very tough fight to call. Both these guys are almost polar opposites of each other in terms of fighting style. You got the striker versus the more grappler favorite fighter. Both of these guys are relatively the same age. And both of these guys are in need of a victory here to propel them further in their career. With their last fight, last 5, I should say, Bryan Caraway is 3 wins, 2 losses versus Pedro Munhoz, who is in his last 5, 4-1. Only loss being a split decision to John Dodson. And I feel like the momentum is just riding along the young Punisher here. I feel like he could finally make a name for himself with a significant victory over Bryan Caraway. So with that, I feel like Pedro's takedown defense will be enough to stop Bryan Caraway's constant pressure, and just the striking aspect, definitely go with Pedro Munhoz. So that is my pick for this co-main event fight. I hope you guys enjoy this analytic breakdown. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Tell me who you think is going to win. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until next time, peace.